Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a brand new retro gaming PC we could buy for playing DOS and Windows 98 games? The reality is that old computer parts are getting hard to find, prices on places such as eBay keep going up, and parts are failing. They need repairs, for example replacing capacitors. As much as we like retro, we also enjoy modern conveniences, having a nice USB keyboard and mouse, convenient flash storage, and using a quiet ATX power supply. And ideally it should look the part and not take up too much space. Well, today we are checking out a brand new retro PC project. It is the ITX-Llama. This one is feature packed. At the heart we have a motherboard in the ITX form factor with a x86 system on a module that can run at 60 to 500 MHz. There's a really cute and compact retro case in the style of an old 486 or Pentium. The board has all sorts of features. We have ATX power, an AGP slot for graphics, there's Sound Blaster Pro and Windows sound system for MS-DOS, a real Yamaha Opel 3 FM module. We've got runnint MT32 support, a wavetable header for general Midi wavetable boards, and even optical audio out. There are PS2 and USB ports for input devices and storage, a game port, a SATA port, an SD card reader, a serial port, Ethernet, even a serial to Wi-Fi modem, and very important, a very nifty BIOS, including DOS and Windows 98 boot floppies that are embedded into the firmware and make it easy to get up and running and playing some games. There is a lot to cover, even from the time where I started working with this project. New discoveries and new BIOS versions have been released. We have games, we have benchmarks, we're digging into all the details, so let's check it out. Full disclosure, I was sent these parts for free. I get to keep them. I want to thank Desert Panther. He reached out to me and made it happen. I also want to thank the Bearwolf. He is one of my patrons and he also has an ITX-Llama, and we've been working together to compare some of our findings. Eivind Böhler, I hope I pronounced this correctly, he is behind the ITX-Llama. This is the third iteration of a tiny retro PC project, the previous projects being the Tiny Llama and Tiny Llama 2. The Vortex 86EX system on a module makes everything happen. It has 128 megabytes of RAM, level 1 and level 2 cache, and we can go into the BIOS, change the CPU speed from 60 to 500 MHz, as well as toggle the CPU caches. We're diving straight into some MS-DOS benchmarks. These are the benchmarks you can get from the DOS benchmark pack. You can download it from my website. They're running at 320 by 200, and I'm using a NVIDIA River TNT2. You can see all the results from 60 MHz all the way up to 500 MHz. And in terms of performance, at the low end we have a fast 486, and at the high end a fast Pentium with a lot of points in between. Testing at 640 by 480 is a lot more demanding. I didn't see too much CPU scaling going on. So here we have results from 300 to 500 megahertz. So some games will work okay at that resolution, but not all of them. An interesting detail, the Vortex 86EX has a single PCI Express lane, and it's connected to a bridge chip, which then connects to an AGP port with 3.3 volts, and it uses PCI signaling. So maybe one of the reasons why at higher resolutions we are seeing these results is that the AGP video card is running at PCI performance speed. Now, what about speed sensitive games like Test Drive 3 or Wing Commander? So you can go into the BIOS, disable the level 1 and level 2 caches, and here we go. This is 3D Bench running, and we're getting a result of 14.9 FPS. So this is on the level of a fast 386, around 40 megahertz. This is still too fast. Here you can see me trying to hit some targets in Wing Commander and really failing. Test Drive 3, it's also hard to control, partly because the game is just yeah, has terrible controls, but also because it runs a little bit too fast. So to slow it down further, you might have to use a software utility such as slowdown.com. Something interesting about this main board, just like with the previous projects, you can download the fabrication files yourself. So if you're ever interested in manufacturing a PCB, consider going with PCBWay, our channel sponsor. You can click on Quick Order PCB and then just select and upload a Gerber file, and it will fill out all the PCB specifications for you. There is an online viewer to take a closer look at your PCB, and you can have the board even assembled for you. Just upload the bill of material when you place the order. For sound in MS-DOS, they went all out. We have so many options. Firstly, we have the good old PC speaker. Now, it can't do much, but it is routed through the line out port. So that's nice. You can listen to older games like Space Quest with PC speaker sound through your nice speakers or headphones. Next up, we have FM synthesis. Connected to ISA, we have a Crystal CS4237B audio chip, and this one has integrated FM. It sounds decent, but if you want to hear real authentic Yamaha OPL3 sound, then be sure to buy an optional OPL3 module. In the BIOS, you can toggle between which one you want. I've got some quick recordings here to compare in the game Stunts. For sound effects, the Crystal CS4237B is compatible with Sound Blaster, Sound Blaster Pro, and the Windows sound system. There is also a DOS mixer utility where you can dial in the levels, and then you can put everything into your AutoExec batch file so you have those levels configured whenever you are booting your computer. When I started testing, I immediately noticed that the Sound Blaster Pro audio is only in mono. So it turns out there was a little bit of an issue that happened during manufacturing. But the good news is that all the batch 2 boards that are going out to customers, they will have a fix applied. For those who have one of the older boards, well, you can use the optical output. That one has a clean stereo signal. We are also covered with Midi. For late 80s and early 90s games, the Roland MT32 or CM32L will give you amazing music. Such Midi modules are hard to find and also very expensive. Thanks to the MT32 Pi project by Dale Winham, we can experience Roland Midi for a much lower price. It is also very flexible. It supports the MT32 old and new, the CM32L, as well as all the different ROM versions, and you control everything from a DOS utility by issuing commands. If you buy the official case, you will get a front panel which has an OLED screen, a dial and buttons, so you can configure everything from the front without having to open the case. Many games supporting Roland expect a intelligent mode MIDI interface. So on the ITX-Llama, we need to load a utility. It's called Soft MPU. The downside is it will increase the time it takes to initialize and load certain games. For example, Space Quest 3, it will take quite a bit longer compared to if you have a intelligent mode MIDI interface in hardware. From around 1993, DOS games started to support the general MIDI standard. We have 2 choices here. We can use the MT32 Pi module, and this one can run the Fluid Synth software synthesizer, so you can just load sound fonts in the SF2 format onto your SD card and off you go. But there's also a physical wavetable header. Here you can install general Midi wavetable modules like Dream Blaster devices that I've been reviewing on the channel for many years. For this, there is a jumper on the motherboard where you can define, do you want to use the MT32 Pi or the wavetable header? Again, if you buy the official case, it will have a toggle button at the front to make that choice easy without having to open the case. Now, space around the wavetable header, it's a little bit limited because, well, it's an ITX board. So you can buy a special OEM version of the Dream Blaster X8GS. This one has the official licensed Roland samples and will give you that nice, balanced and authentic Roland general MIDI music in DOS games. Now, maybe you already have an external MIDI device, maybe you have a Roland sound canvas, maybe something from Yamaha or a Roland MT32. Well, you can also use that. You can use the blue line in port at the back, but then you need to change a jumper that toggles between routing the external line in into the sound chip or routing the MT32 Pi or wavetable board. For storage, we have two options, SATA or micro SD. My recommendations for MS-DOS is to use the micro SD slot. Any half-decent SD card should be fine. If you want a recommendation, look out for one with the A1 rating. That one is optimized for applications, so it will handle DOS just fine. DOS was really easy to set up. I'm just accessing the integrated MS-DOS boot floppy. You can partition, format and make bootable your SD card. I actually recommend in the beginning that you stick with the built-in supplied boot disks. I will dig into the details a little bit later on, but if you're using your own boot menu or your own config files, you might run into a few issues. What about an optical drive? A lot of DOS games come on CD-ROM. Now, unfortunately, we don't get a native IDE port, so we have the option of using the SATA port mostly. So that's what I did. I connected a SATA CD-ROM drive and that worked fine for me. Choose the SATA ID CD-ROM support option from the boot menu and off you go. Here I'm installing System Shock. This is the enhanced CD-ROM version and that game worked fine. You can try using USB optical drives. Now the specific model that I have here, it didn't quite work out, but I've been told there are some other drivers that you can try your luck with. I had more success with this gadget here. This is an adapter. It converts ID devices as well as SATA devices into USB 3. From the boot menu, select USB CD-ROM support and off you go. Here we have some footage installing Screamer Rally from CD-ROM and a bit of gameplay. Yeah, it worked just fine. There are also a range of options of using virtual CD-ROM drives under MS-DOS. I've done a video previously. None of them are perfect, but again, it's another option. And let's focus on what works. There are many games that will work with these workarounds. But what about games that use CD digital audio? Quite a few games have music on the CD and sound amazing. Well, there's one option. I wasn't able to test it out, but what you need to do is you need to have a IDE optical drive with either a headphone port at the front or an analog audio out at the back, and then you need to use what's called a bi-directional SATA to ID adapter. So that will convert your ID drive to a SATA device, and then you can connect it to the motherboard. On the motherboard is a header for CD audio in, so you just need a cable to connect from the back of the optical drive into this port. So all in all, the optical disk drive situation, it's not perfect, but we do have a wide range of solutions. And now let's talk about some of the issues that I ran into, including a few workarounds that we've managed to figure out. I started using my MS-DOS starter pack and it locked up immediately after loading EMM386. I checked the boot floppy and I noticed it has additional parameters and those worked for me. In Wing Commander, I saw quite a few issues. One also relates to the options in your startup files. I had a look on the supplied boot floppy, and it uses options for stacks, files, and buffers. And with those parameters, Wing Commander worked just fine, whereas with my boot files, it crashed. So that's why I recommend, when you're starting using this device, stick with the boot floppies that are supplied. You will have a better experience. One game that didn't want to work at all is Iron Man Super Off-Road. At the moment, we don't have a workaround yet. In Wing Commander, we noticed something weird. The game would automatically press the enter key and you couldn't navigate the menus. So it turns out this is related to the game port. The game port on the ITX-Llama only supports the first joystick and the first two buttons. The second joystick and the third and the fourth button, they're used to drive the OPL3 module and the digital output. And it seems that Wing Commander is actually listening for button 3 and 4. So the workaround for this game is you go into the BIOS and you change the address of the game port, basically disabling it. You can use a USB keyboard and mouse. There is a converter using a Raspberry Pi. So this is a project by no one, and this works fine. But when testing System Shock, I noticed that whenever I pressed the mouse button, the cursor would jump up, and I could confirm it also in the DOS editor. But yeah, well, I did some testing, and it turns out this is related to the DOS key utility that is being loaded by default with the boot disk. By disabling DOS key, I didn't have this issue anymore. We also found another game that is sensitive to CPU performance. It is Gods. It would fail to initialize the Roland. Here we have to use the slowdown.com utility to slow it down further to work around this issue. So to summarize things so far, the ITX-Llama, it's really good for DOS, especially the sound options. I mean, we are covered from the PC speaker routed to the line out. We've got Sound Blaster Pro, Sound Blaster, Windows Sound System. We've got a FM chip from Crystal, as well as an option for an authentic Yamaha OPL3. We are covered with all the MIDI options. The MT32 Pi project handles the MT32, CM32L and all of that. We can load SF2 sound fonts, and we can also connect a wavetable board, and we have optical audio out. Let's move on to Windows 98. Installation is easy. I booted from the integrated Windows 98 SE floppy disk, partitioned, formatted, and made the drive bootable. There is one little workaround you need to do. After the first reboot, you need to hit the F8 key and then choose the command prompt option and install a storage patch by Rudolf A. Löw. We don't need any chipset drivers. There are drivers for Ethernet and for the sound chip, however. I installed Windows 98 on both a SATA SSD and a micro SD card. The SATA drive is much faster. We have some benchmark results here. But the SD card slot has a huge advantage. It's got a hard drive clicker feature. I've got some recordings here, and yeah, I was really surprised. It really adds some flair and some nostalgic feelings to this project. I didn't expect that. Now, with the optical drive under Windows, we can just use daemon tools to mount images, and this also supports CD digital audio. When benchmarking, I noticed that with 500 MHz, I had some instability issues. The drive would corrupt and it would blue screen randomly. I did use a fan, but maybe I was just unlucky and my model doesn't handle the 500 MHz. So I went with the 466 MHz option, and that was rock solid. Here we have some of my very popular benchmark results. Incoming Draken, Expendable, Quake 2 and GL Quake, running at the default 300 MHz and then at the higher 466 MHz. I also have results for 3D Mark 99 Max. We're getting 706 3D Marks at 300 MHz, and at 466 MHz we're getting 1087. For Windows 98 testing, I'm using a Voodoo 3 3500 Firstly, because this is very compatible with the Llama ITX, but also thanks to the Glide API, and in general, this is a video card that is really that works really well with CPUs that are a little bit on the weak side. Talking about the video card, there is a ITX-Llama hardware compatibility document online that shows you what works and what doesn't work. Under DOS, most cards should work just fine, but under Windows, it's the NVIDIA cards that are causing issues. So for Windows, you're better off with a Voodoo card or with a Radeon. Let's have a look at some of the Windows 98 games that worked well for me. First up, we have Tomb Raider 2. This is a version I purchased on GOG. You just copy the folder across and off you go. Shadow of the Empire. I have bought this game on GOG, but it's not compatible with the retro PC anymore. They modified it too much, so I found an image of the disc online. Also runs beautifully. Moto Racer, this is a demo version. I have the full version from GOG, but I also believe this one doesn't work on a retro PC anymore. Colin McRae Rally, this is the first title. I don't think you can buy this game digitally, so you have to find a copy on eBay or from an abandonware website. This game runs fine, but I had issues with the sound. It just wouldn't play sound in the game. It would play sound in the intro, but not in the game. I played around a little bit with DX diagnostics. You can change the hardware acceleration, but it didn't solve the issue. Dark Forces 2, well, you guessed it, purchased from GOG and runs beautifully on a retro PC. Works also fine on this machine. Let's have a look at some games that do run, but are a little bit a challenge for this system. Rune is first. Again, a GOG release, but you need to go to the extras and download the original version. I think it's called Rune Gold. Supports the Glide API. Looks beautiful. It runs, but it's a little bit on the choppy side. Shogo had a similar experience, a little bit choppy with the frame rate and some audio glitching going on, but maybe there's a workaround. I didn't dig too deep with this one. It's also a GOG release. Well, I think you can see a trend here. Most of my games are from GOG. It's my way of supporting their initiative. Thief 2 is next. This is also a GOG release, but I have been told that when you run this on a retro gaming PC, there might be some issues. I haven't noticed anything yet because I only use it for quick testing. I haven't played it that much yet. Screamer 4x4, also a release from GOG. This one is interesting. It supports the OpenGL, the Direct 3D, and the Glide API. Here we have it running in Glide mode. Again, it's a little bit on the slow side for our processor. The only game that didn't run for me is Age of Empires. Some graphics corruption that I noticed, but this is only the trial version, so maybe the full release is running better. Let's talk about networking. We have a 100 megabit Ethernet controller. There is a serial port at the back of the motherboard. There's also an internal TTL serial port header on the motherboard. And then we have something really interesting. It's an ESP8266 based serial to Wi-Fi modem. Now, I've got no idea about this project and what it does and what it's used for, but I'm mentioning it because it sounds very interesting. If it has a BIOS, we will flash it. I think this release that I got is not official yet, so we're doing some testing behind the scenes. Let's have a look at all the options. CPU settings, you can change the clock speed and toggle the CPU caches. Under disk settings, you can choose the boot order, and you can also have USB devices mapped as fixed disks. So you can use a USB thumb drive and use that as a hard drive under DOS, for example. You can change the base clock speed for the serial ports. Many options for the audio you can change, mostly the port addresses of all these devices, but you can also toggle the optical audio out, and you can toggle between the Crystal FM synthesizer and the external Yamaha OPL3 module if you buy one. Under Ethernet settings, you can choose different MAC addresses. The board has 3 fan headers. There are 4 pins, so supporting PWM, and you can change the speed here. And finally, you can choose the tune that's being played when you post the machine. You can toggle the LED, the intensity, and also you can toggle the hard drive clicker. The mainboard has buttons for power and reset, and there's also a front panel header to connect everything to your case. I used a power meter to see how much power the machine consumes, and it's around 30 to 40 watts. The official case is really beautiful. I don't have one to show you, so I'm just putting some photos on the screen. It's got USB ports, micro SD card reader at the front, controls for the MT32 Pi, power and reset buttons. There's a power and hard drive activity LED. It's got a toggle that lets you choose between the MT32 Pi and wavetable. There's space for a 80mm fan for storage, and it's compatible with Pico power supplies. So guys, that was a lot that we covered, and also be aware that things are still being discovered and modified. So by the time you see this video, there's a chance a new BIOS version is out, and maybe some other workarounds for some of the issues I ran into have been discovered. So keep that in mind. For retro gaming, I think this one is much better for MS-DOS. Especially with the sound options, I mean, we are spoiled for choice. All the bases are covered. Under Windows 98, it's suitable for early Windows 98 games, but once you start playing games like Expendable, Draken, and maybe you want EAX or A3D, accelerated 3D audio, then this one, firstly, the CPU is not fast enough, and we don't have PCI slots for a nice sound card. Now, where can you buy this? And this is where it gets tricky. So all the components are available from the Retro Dreams website. Batch 2 is already sold out and being shipped. So we are hoping there will be another batch. So I recommend you sign up for the newsletter to get notified when there will be another batch announced. It's also not very cheap. Once you tick all the options for a fully decked out retro PC, you're looking at around 700 USD and a little bit more. So for that money, you can definitely buy a retro gaming PC on places such as eBay, but you need to also factor in that you get MT32, CM32L, Sound Canvas, so then the comparison is not that straightforward anymore. And you still need to supply your own graphics card, storage, and a power supply. Now, with a Radeon 9000 type video card, that's not going to set you back too much, but if you want a Voodoo 3, then definitely that will command a premium. We also ran into a few compatibility issues. Now, we did find workarounds for many of them, but there's no guarantee that every game will work. So all in all, the ITX-Llama has a lot to offer, but it's not perfect. If you are a little bit of a tweaker, you don't mind testing and mucking around and finding workarounds, you will have a lot of fun with this project. Also, if you want to be part of a community, joining a Discord server, comparing your findings and learning things as you go. And like I said, progress developments are being made while I'm speaking. When I got the board and now filming, already new BIOS versions have been released. So there will definitely be some improvements down the track. I did my best to cover all the bases. This was one of my longest videos in recent times. A lot of testing went into this one, so I'm really eager to hear your thoughts. Any questions, leave them down below. And thank you for all the support, for watching my videos, and big thank you to everyone involved in this project for sending me out a sample. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you soon with another one.